You won't believe what happened when my HOA neighbor, the queen of entitlement herself, decided my front lawn was her personal shortcut. Every single day, she drove her SUV straight across my grass, leaving deep tire marks and smirking like she owned the place. I asked her to stop. I put up signs. I even went to the HOA board. But nothing worked because she was the HOA Karen. So finally, I came up with a plan, harmless but unforgettable. I planted a minefield across my lawn, and the day she drove into it, the entire neighborhood witnessed a showdown they'll never forget. I moved into my new house and poured pride into my little front yard, mowing every weekend, edging like a maniac, planting flowers that actually bloomed. It was my sanctuary. Then, a few weeks in, I started noticing diagonal tire tracks across the grass. At first I shrugged. People make mistakes, right? But then it became a pattern. Every morning, the same SUV, the same swagger, the same path across my lawn. Her name was Karen, but not the joke you heard in the meme kind. She was the HOA Karen. Clipboard, rules fetish, unofficial watchdog of the neighborhood. Instead of taking the driveway like a normal person, she preferred to cut the corner across my grass, as if the curb and sidewalk didn't exist. When I asked her to stop the very first time, she gave me that patented half-smile and said, "It's just grass. Don't be dramatic." That was the last friendly conversation we had. This wasn't about aesthetics anymore. It was about respect. Repeatedly walking all over something you care about is a quiet kind of violence. So I promised myself I wouldn't let it slide. I tried to be reasonable. I put up a polite sign that read, "Please do not drive on the grass." The sign disappeared within a week. I lined the border with big flower pots. She swerved around them like they were invisible. Then I went to the HOA. I expected at least a nod of support. Instead, I got bureaucracy. And guess who had the loudest voice on the board? You guessed it. Karen. Every formality failed. Every polite ask bounced off her entitlement. She was the kind of person who loved rules, as long as they were enforced on everyone else. When enforcement didn't go my way, I felt small, and frustration grew into a plan. Not revenge for revenge's sake, but firm, creative response that would stop the behavior without causing harm. One evening, my friend half-joked, "Plant mines." He laughed and sipped his beer. I laughed too, but the image stuck. The idea of a harmless minefield that would make a shortcut feel like a risk. Not to hurt, but to teach. That night, I sketched a plan I could live with, legal, safe, and humiliating in the best possible way. I wanted something passive, something that would activate only if someone actually drove across the lawn. No booby traps, nothing that would break a car or hurt a person. I assembled 3 things: motion-activated sprinklers, fake warning signs, and small concealed paint domes. The domes weren't explosive. They were plastic hemispheres that would burst under the weight of a tire and puff out bright, washable, non-toxic paint powder. Think paintball meeting confetti. Harmless but impossible to ignore. I positioned sprinklers to soak any vehicle crossing the grass, which would startle and slow a driver. Then I planted the paint domes in the most likely tire path and placed a bold, ridiculous-looking sign in a yard that read, "Caution! Experimental lawn devices. Enter at your own risk." Cheeky, dramatic, and unignorable. I also set up a camera. Not to gloat, but to have proof of trespass if the whole thing blew up, pun not intended. I told myself I'd reveal the footage only if I needed to. Mostly, I wanted to watch and see if my plan worked. To see entitlement confronted by consequences that were clever, nonviolent, and public. The next morning, I pulled up a chair by my window with a cup of coffee and a grin. True to form, Karen emerged, sunglasses on, coffee in hand. She slid into her SUV, turned the ignition, and steered straight for what used to be her shortcut. As her tires left the pavement and touched my grass, the sprinklers erupted. Cold jets hit her windshield and doors. She yelped, slammed on the brakes, and cursed. That got me smiling. Then the domes did their thing. Pop! A burst of neon blue smacked across her front bumper. Pop! A flash of orange dust puffed from under the rear tire. Within seconds, her pristine white SUV looked like an abstract painting. Drips, splatters, and streaks of color all over the body and windows. She reveed, spun, and tore off the lawn, squealing toward the street with paint streaking down the side like war paint. People started to notice. A neighbor across the way waved, then walked over to inspect the mess. Karen stormed back to my door like a hurricane, paint sloshing off her shoes and fury boiling. She screamed, "You vandalized my car. You'll pay for this." But I stayed calm and pointed at the sign and the camera. "You drove onto my private property after I asked you not to." I said, "This is trespassing." I offered to show the footage. That moment felt important. Not because I enjoyed her humiliation, but because there was an unmistakable line between entitled behavior and accountability. She had been given every chance to stop. The neighborhood buzzed for days. People whispered and chuckled when Karen walked by, still wiping paint from her fender and her dignity. The HOA finally had to address a complaint because the story had legs, and because a clip from my camera made it painfully clear who had trespassed. The police came to take a report. They didn't arrest me. The officers were polite and matter-of-fact. Their first question was whether anyone had been injured. No. Their second was whether trespassing had occurred. The footage answered that before I had to. One officer even raised an eyebrow and said, "That's one way to handle a shortcut." I took it as a compliment. Karen tried to spin the story into victimhood. She claimed I had set traps. I could have gone scorched earth, but I simply laid out the facts. Repeated trespass, warnings ignored, attempts to resolve through HOA and the sign that I'd posted. There was no legal case for vandalism against me. The paint was non-toxic and meant only to startle and embarrass, and she had crossed private property despite knowing better. Slowly, normal life edged back in. The grass healed, the flower beds filled in again, and I enjoyed quiet weekends mowing in peace. Karen learned to take the road. She kept her distance, and the HOA board had to reckon with their biased behavior. Neighbors didn't forget who had sided with her when the evidence was clear. Mostly, I learned that sometimes you don't need anger to solve a problem. You need creativity, patience, and a willingness to set a firm boundary. This story isn't a tutorial on how to get back at someone. It's a reminder. Consistent disrespect deserves a consistent response. You can be clever without being cruel. You can defend what's yours without crossing legal or moral lines. And sometimes a little public embarrassment is the exact medicine entitlement needs. So if you ever find someone treating your property like a shortcut, remember, you don't have to escalate to hostility. Get creative, stay within the law, and make the consequence clear enough that the next time they'll think twice. My lawn got its piece back, and the neighborhood learned a lesson about boundaries, all without anyone getting hurt. You won't believe what happened when my HOA neighbor, the queen of entitlement herself, decided my front lawn was her personal shortcut. Every single day, she drove her SUV straight across my grass, leaving deep tire marks and smirking like she owned the place. I asked her to stop. I put up signs. I even went to the HOA board. But nothing worked because she was the HOA Karen. So finally, I came up with a plan, harmless, but unforgettable. I planted a minefield across my lawn, and the day she drove into it, the entire neighborhood witnessed a showdown they'll never forget.